Okay, next we'll do just a general overview and walkthrough of the system. We'll start off with what makes the system record. So the basic theory of what makes the system record is when an alarm is active. So as far as the sensor wire goes, as long as they are detecting voltage, the system will continue to record. Once all the voltage has been removed from the wires where the alarm is deactivated, the system will then cease to record. So next we'll go through some of the menus here and some of the different things that we can do. So starting off in the general section, date and time, you'll see time, the date format and then the date, and your time format and the time. If you need to change your time, you don't actually change the time, you change your time zone. And just note the negative in front of those numbers. Here in America, we are solidly in the negative. You put in a positive number, that will put you somewhere in Europe, and your time will be in hours and a day off. Next, daylight savings time, adjusted for 1 hour. That should be set already. If not, you can go ahead and check that there. The screen off, that is actually not working with our system. Our system, the screen stays on until you turn it off manually. Time mode GPS just means that it gets its time from the GPS sensor. Time check, power mode ignition, power off delay, this should be set to 0 unless there's some type of reason that you would need the system to stay on after you've set it to record. So next, vehicle info, and here is where you can put in your officer's name, department name, and that type of stuff. The mile accrual, don't worry about that. We don't have the system hooked up to your OBD computer, so that's not going to be in there. User setup, if you run multiple drivers in the same car, you can set them each up with their own account so that their name is displayed when they're in the vehicle. Over here to display, leave this all set NTSC, it's where we are here in America. Preview, channel 1, this is the default channel that the system will show. So by default, it's set to show channel 1, which is your forward-facing camera. Next, this is just some stuff that is overlaid on the screen. You can adjust that all as you see fit. Just note that the encode is the category where it will put that information on the card to view in the office. The front is just what the officer sees, and you can adjust them individually. All right, next, the alarm menus. This is particularly helpful for all of you installers here. Sensor, these are what actually activates the recording. So you'll see here we're on IO1 by default. Now, what it's showing you is these are all of the settings for the number 1 alarm wire, which we have labeled as lights. When you change it to IO2, you'll see this is the manual switch, so these are all of the settings for the manual switch. And then lastly, IO3, this is your wireless mic that the officer wears. These are all of the settings for that. If you have a 900 megahertz microphone, which has 10.8 video printed on the front of it, the correct E level is high. If you have one of the older microphones, the 2.4 gigahertz that has 95 CH printed on the front, then the correct E level is low for that one. But all of these systems from now on will be shipping with the 900, so the current setting for that is high. Type alarm, and don't worry about the rest of these. Save it if you need to. Next, your speed sensor. This is set up off the GPS, so basically the way we have it defaulted is that at a high speed of 80 miles an hour, that will set off an alarm. The unit will remain on as long as the speed is above 80 miles an hour. Once it drops back below 80, it would then deactivate. Now, you can set this up to whatever your department's protocol is for that, but that is where it is. The G sensor. So this is going to have to do with if the vehicle is in an accident. It's the force detector, how hard it hits. They're currently all set at 1.5 Gs, which is actually quite a lot. That's your whole body weight of your vehicle 1.5 times. If you want to set them a little higher to around 2, You can definitely do that. I don't recommend going any higher than 2.5. That would be a pretty severe accident. It would have to be in to start getting up above that measure there. One thing that you will want to do, especially for the installers, is calibrate it. Depending on how the system is mounted will determine that force. So for instance, if you mount the unit on its side, which I just turned the unit on its side here, you can see the G-forces turn over much more. We went from a negative to a positive when I turned it the other way. However it's mounted in the vehicle, it can be adjusted for. So when you hit calibrate, now even though the unit I have is still on its side, it's reading as 0.0. Just keep in mind a 0.02 fluctuation when it's not moving is completely normal. Now I set the unit back down, you'll see the G-force come up, so I'm going to recalibrate it. And now it's set for how it's mounted in the vehicle here. So next we'll move into alarm out. There's nothing that you should adjust in here, but I'll go over what should be correct. So IO1, again, these are the settings for input output 1. Those are all correct. IO2, sometimes the output on this will be set to output 1, but as you see it is correct. So at IO2, this setting should be set to none, and IO3, this setting should also be set to none. If they weren't, make those changes, and then make sure you go down to the bottom, save it, and then put in your password if you need to. Some other things in here, temperature, motion, and other alarm, these are all not used in our system, so go ahead and ignore those. Next we have the tools menu. If you would like to set up a configuration file, if you have multiple units and you want to make sure they're all configured the same, simply come over here, hit export, and what that will do is that will put a configuration file on the SD card, in addition to all the other files that are on there. It doesn't need to be a clean card. And then you can take that SD card around to all the other vehicles and simply hit import, and it will set up all of these settings. Just note this does not do officer information. That information is left out, so it's just the settings that you're going over. Also in this section, default config, that is the factory reset. If you feel that settings have been changed or for any reason you want to set it back to how it is when we ship it to you, the default configuration option is you'll do that. Format, this will format the SD card. Now I currently don't have any cards in my unit, so nothing is on the screen, but if you need to format your SD card, which erases everything on the card, this is where you will do that. Next is the search option. So what you see there are days for days of the month. Or if you want to know the date exactly that you're looking for a recording, you can put that in there and then hit search, and everything for that day will come up in your list. Next, system info. This is just a quick readout of a bunch of information. Not too much handy here other than the IO state. That will tell you what voltage is currently being detected on the wires. Also your storage space there on the next screen at the top. Again, I don't have any SD cards currently in this unit, so it reads 0. Next is the camera type. You shouldn't have to adjust this. All we're telling it right here is on the top line that we have 4 high definition cameras. The only other option that you would really use is if you had 4 cameras and some of them were not high definition, you could have 2 high definition and 2 standard definition there. But other than that, don't adjust that, leave that where it is. Next, the recording menu, the normal section. This is some basic settings here. You'll see here on live mode, this is the mode that your system will display in. So basically if you have it set on 2-channel or 4-channel, that will split your screen that you look at by default. So I recommend just leaving it on 1 channel so you can see 1 screen at a time. Record type should be normal. Record mode should be alarm. If your system is recording all the time, this is one of the first things you'll want to check. If it's set to auto, that means it will automatically record as soon as you get in the vehicle. So that should be alarm, downloading record, that is correct. Record length 60 minutes. That means that the system will record in 1 hour increments. When 1 hour is reached, it'll create another file and continue to record, so you won't lose any time. There will be no gap in your information. It will just simply do that for evidence preservation. Overwrite on, meaning that once the card is full, it will then go back to the oldest events and start recording them. Pre-record 30 seconds. I recommend leaving that where it's at. The alarm delay, alarm out, and file lock. Those are non-negotiable. Don't adjust those. Leave those as they are set. Audio out volume. If you have it hooked up to a speaker, that's where that's controlled. But that's it. Record quality. This is where you tell the system how many cameras you have and what they should be the resolution recording in. So channel 1 I have set to on. That's my front camera. The resolution I have set to 720p, 12 frames per second, and just for some quick reference, that's literally how many pictures it takes per second. You can set it as low as, like, I recommend going 8 on the low end. That's 8 frames per second. It's a slightly choppy picture, but plenty good for evidence. 12 frames is generally where I recommend keeping it. That's half of film. And just so you know, regular film, that when you go watch a movie, is filmed at 24 frames per second. And some things like commercials and TV shows and that are recorded as high as 30 frames per second. Just note that I do ship it at 12. Quality is 1. The lower the number, the better the quality. Or for all of you nerds out there, this is your compression. The higher the number, the more compressed the video is, which is why you lose a little bit of quality. Audio, we want that on, so we're always recording audio. And enable, we want that on. And then any settings you have in there, make sure. Okay, next is SubStream and record plan. Those are not related to anything that our system does right now, so leave those alone. Also, peripherals, that's not currently being used by our system. If you have a need for this, you'll know. If not, then you don't. Leave those as they are. And that covers the basic menus of the system and a general walkthrough of the function.